Hello and welcome back to another brand new episode of the MEM1 Mosaic podcast. Today I have with me my guest Christina Lile, who is a diabetic health consultant, a registered nurse, and also has experience with type 1 diabetes herself. Now, I'm going to say it straight away, MEM1 and diabetes are not the same thing. However, there is huge crossover. MEM1 patients might experience insulinomas in their time, hyperglycemia, and also just be mindful of glucose spikes, which we know is something that can really affect our general health. So I've asked Christina to come on today and share about things like what can really help stabilize blood sugar, factors like timing of meals, food, and factors like stress as well, which can affect blood sugar, and also how to support the body through something which can be really, really unpredictable. And I know that a lot of patients struggle with. So I'm really excited to have you on, Christina. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I'm excited to get chatting.
Thank you so much. I just want to say I'm so excited to be here, and I cannot wait for everything we're going to discuss today because it's going to be absolutely amazing. So,
I'm so excited as well. So excited to have you on. And particularly because, as I just explained to you before we started, you are someone with experience as a diabetes patient yourself, but you also have experience working with other diabetes patients. And I know from the feedback I've had from listeners, this can be so valuable because you've got both perspectives. You can really appreciate the struggles, but you can also be, you're able to give advice from a very compassionate and empathetic place. So I think it might actually help us if maybe you explained a little bit about your journey, how you've got to where you are so far, maybe starting with your diagnosis, whenever that came, and yeah, how on earth you became a diabetes health coach, and obviously through being a registered nurse too.
yeah, absolutely. So, I'm just going to start at the beginning. At the age of 5, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. And one of the main things that I realized pretty quickly is how much of a community we need. And so one of the and people laugh when I say this, but one of the cool things about my diagnosis is that I was diagnosed in June. I turned 5 in May and I was diagnosed a month later. And the hospital told me and my family about a diabetes health camp, a kids camp. And so my parents were really hesitant to let me go because literally we just got this diagnosis. They don't even understand it yet. But the doctors and the staff were like, this, like, you don't realize this right now, but Christina needs this. And we gives me chills. Um, and so I went to camp at 6. I did it at 5 years, and then I did it the following summer at 6. And it was, I can't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks long, but everybody at that camp was a diabetic. The counselors, the janitors, the groundskeepers, the cooks, everybody was a diabetic. And so at the time, I was 5 and 6 years old. I didn't understand like support systems and feeling empowered. But looking back over 40 years later, that's exactly what that did for me. And kind of got me into, hey, you need to surround yourself with people that are exactly like you. So let's fast forward to my early 20s. And I kind of fell into a group of diabetics that were from the age of 15 up to 60 or 65. And we would literally meet once or twice a month, and we would sit down and we would, have dinner or whatever, but we talk about struggles, obstacles we were facing. Hey, have you tried this? This really worked for me, like tips and tricks and things like that. And what's the what's the craziest low blood sugar story you've gotten? What's the highest your blood sugar has been? What's the lowest your blood sugar has been? And through that, a community of support. And the thing that, looking back at it now, like, it didn't matter if you were 15 or 65, all of our struggles, they may not have been exactly the same, but they were very similar. And that again goes back into that community of, I'm not standing out here in left field all by myself. Like, these people understand what it's like. They understand the frustrations. So in my late 20s, I decided to become a nurse. And during nursing school, and then shortly after I graduated and got my first nursing job, it became very clear how much I enjoyed and thrived at helping people. I excelled at it. I loved it. um, I'm very much a person that thinks outside of the box. So if you tell me I can't do it, man, I'm going to find a way. It's going to be super creative, and maybe a little crazy and out there, but it's going to work. And like, I'll find out all the little details as we go along. And so that became very evident. And then in 2022, I decided I was going to go back to school and get my master's degree in nursing education. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with that degree. I just knew that I wanted to do something with teaching diabetics. Usually, with that degree, you help nurses, and I'm open to that. I'm totally open to that. But I really, my focus was, and I didn't know what it looked like at the time, but it was I want to help diabetics. And so I did the program, finished in about 9 months. And when I graduated, friends and family were like, Christina, you need to be a diabetic educator. You need to be a diabetic educator. And so I started applying for any jobs that were diabetic education, nursing education with diabetics. And I did like 80 interviews in a year. And got offered several amazing jobs. And I couldn't find anything that was what I was looking for. And so I really started to question and doubt, like, is the job I want not out there, And so one day at the gym, a very smart friend of mine, gym buddy, I was just, we were talking about my frustrations, and I've been looking for a year, and like, do I just, it doesn't have to be the perfect job, but I know I'm supposed to do this, like in my heart, in my soul, down in my core, like I am supposed to help diabetics. I have no idea what that looks like, but I also don't want to start going down a path that I know is not right. But but then I'm also not doing what I know I should be doing. And so I vividly remember it. She turned to me and she's like, Christina, if the job you want isn't out there, then make it. And I was like, Joy, I'm a nurse. I'm not a business owner. Let's just get that. And she just literally turned around and looked at me and she's like, girl, if the job you want is not out there, then make it. You can learn the business stuff. And she literally turned on her heel and walked away from me. And I was just, and my head is just spinning. And so it took me about 2 months of really just going over, like, what would this look like, and and how do I be a business owner, and like just going through all those steps. And I can proudly say, in October of 2023, I launched my business, My Nurse Advocate LLC, and I am a diabetic health consultant. And that's kind of the short version of how we got from diagnosis to where we are today. And now it's 18 months later, and we're doing podcasts, and I'm educating my clients, and I'm absolutely doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So
Congratulations, first and foremost. And may I just say, I relate very much with so many parts of your journey. And I know that there'll be people listening back who probably do as well. And maybe they're feeling a calling to help people like them and to understand and learn your story, how important community is, and feeling surrounded by the right people is so important. It's such a beautiful note to have started from, and really springboards, I think, into one of the first questions I wanted to ask you, which was, in your capacity as helping diabetes patients, and bearing in mind, as I said earlier, there'll be a lot of crossover with MEM1, particularly around sugars that mess around. What are kind of some of the key principles that you help people with, that you teach to people when they're managing their blood sugar, particularly if these sugars might be very unstable?
yeah. So and this is probably the hardest thing, and people look at me like I'm crazy when I say this. Make yourself the priority. And it's very simple, It's not easy, but it's very simple. And I think just as people, we're taught growing up, you take care of other people, especially if you're a mom with 4 kids. Like, you don't have time. Well, can you carve out an hour, or when your partner gets home from work, can you just have agree that you've got an hour or two? If you've got 2 hours, that's even better. But just to set time aside and make yourself a priority, and that looks different for everybody. That may be going to the gym, that may be um, really getting into what variables are making your blood sugars do what. And that's a key point of my program. Like, we literally and my program is very personalized. Like, we go through this kind of the steps, the same steps with everybody, but like, if you've got the education part down, we will touch on it, but we I won't spend a month on it. Whereas if you're like, my blood sugar is up and down and up and down, and I don't know what's going on, we literally separate every single variable, and we take it down to step one, and we can decide whatever that wants to be that works for you the easiest. And we figure out, okay, you know um, is it is the variables that what you're eating, when you're eating, how you're eating, and the order you're eating your food, because that matters. Like, things that and these are all, I'll be honest with you, these are all things I've learned from other diabetics, not from my endocrinologist. I'm not dogging on the doctors, because they are a necessary piece to the puzzle. I'm not bad mouthing. I'm just saying, they are usually not diabetics, and they don't know what it's their pancreas works the way it's supposed to. They don't have insulinomas. Um, and so they don't know the frustrations when you're trying to do everything right and you keep failing, and how after several days of failing, it's just like, why even try? you know and so for me in my program, we really get into isolating your variables. What it could be, two or three, it could be 20. And we literally, okay, how does this variable affect your blood sugar? Okay, if we do this and we add this second variable, how does that affect your blood sugar? And it takes time. And this isn't, I don't want anyone to think, oh my gosh, Christina's going to put me through school again if I hire her. Like, but it's literally a couple of days of hard work, and then we figure it out. But the cool thing is that every time you put, I always think of it like, when we figure out a variable with your blood sugar, it's like point 0.1 for Christina, point 0 for diabetes, like a game. And then when you get 8 or 10 of these points on your side, then that makes all those others decisions. You now know what your body's going to do in each of those situations. And so it just makes everything from that point on, it gets a lot easier. And when you can say, okay, well, I know if I eat breakfast and I have this many, this much protein, this many carbs, this is what my blood sugar is going to do. And I know that if I have a really hard workout, my blood sugar is going to go up by 150 points. This is how I can pre-plan, because I know that's what's going to happen. And it sets you up for success. I hope I answered that.
Absolutely. And you keep giving me the kind of like the springboard for the next question. So, as I said before, you are one of my favorite guests so far.
Thank you.
My next kind of thing I wanted to ask is, in terms of these factors that you look at when you're working with a client, um, you'd mentioned things like, what you're eating, when you're eating, the order in which you're eating. Can you maybe just dive in on one of these, for example, and give us a little bit of context? And if someone came to you and they said, "Look, my blood sugars are all over the place," and you looked at, I don't know, what the order in which they're eating their food, what might we see that causes one response, and what might we see that causes another?
Yeah. Oh, it gives me chills. So this is something I learned from another diabetic. The order you eat your food, and that's sometimes not always easy to do, but I'll give you an example. My breakfast most days is 2 scoops of protein powder, some berries, and um, 81 grams of Honey Nut Cheerios. It's like about a cup and a half, give or take. Um, and I had a friend of mine, and I'm like, I, I don't understand why some days my blood sugar goes high after breakfast, and and you want rolling hills with your blood sugar. You do not want spikes with peaks and valleys. You just want more of a rolling hill experience to be under good control. Whether you're diabetic, MEN1, a person that their pancreas works normally. Um, and so she's like, "Do you realize the order in which you eat your food factors into your blood sugars?" And I'm like, what do you, I mean, I've been a nurse for over 20 years. And although I'm sure I was taught this, like it's not something that's talked about a lot. And I'm like, been a diabetic for over 40 years and I've never had anyone tell me this. I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, if you eat your food, you eat the fiber first, then you eat your fats, then you eat your protein, and then you eat your carbs. The fiber, the fats, and the protein slow down the absorption of the carbs. And you know me, I'm a skeptic. I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. So the next morning I got up, blood sugar was 125. And I was like, okay, I'm going to control as many variables as I can. So literally, I didn't go to the gym that morning. I was like, we'll do it in the afternoon. So I got up, I ate my breakfast like I normally would. So I had my bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios. I put my strawberries in the bowl. And then when I was done eating my cereal, I drank my protein shake. Done. Within an hour, my blood sugar was 260. And like I keep my blood sugar between 80 and 120, spiked up. And then I stayed at 260, 280 for about 3 to 4 hours. And then let me back up and say, I took my fast acting injection and then I ate. Um, and so, I'm sitting at 260, 280. And I know that once my insulin kicks in and catches up, I'll be fine. But again, I had that peak. And then about 6 hours later, I was back down to 150. Okay, well, that's like I screenshotted my Dexcom readings on my CGM. I was like, well, that's that, okay. And that's what usually happened every morning. So the third day, I go, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it her way. I ate my berries for my fiber. Then I didn't really have a lot of fat per se. I drank my protein shake and then immediately had my bowl of cereal. Same amount of time eating. When I got up that morning, my blood sugar was 118, so relatively the same. I literally took my insulin, my fast acting insulin, right before I started eating, so that variable was kept the same. And within an hour, my blood sugar had gone from 118 to 152. Gives me chills. And then I stayed about 150, 135 for about 3 hours. And then I came back down to 98 and stayed there. So, like, we just were kind of the rolling hills. So on the fourth day, I'm like, let's try one more thing. So I did exactly everything I did on day 3, except for I took my insulin and I waited about 20 to 30 minutes. And I never peaked. I never, like, I literally, and don't quote me on the number, but I started, let's just say 120. And I literally went up to like 135 and I just stayed there. And then I again came back down to about 90 within 4 hours. And I was like, I called my friend and I was like, oh my gosh, you're a genius. I was like, why does nobody talk about this? And so, like, how you can incorporate, let's say you go out and you have a cheeseburger, you go to McDonald's. Well, there's not a whole lot of fiber at McDonald's unless you have a salad first. And that's always a nice option to have. But let's say you just get a cheeseburger, French fries, and a diet drink. If you eat your cheeseburger first, and I would recommend possibly taking off one of the buns, okay, let's just limit the amount of carbs a little bit. But that protein, even though you're eating it at the same time as the carbs, And of course, McDonald's cheeseburgers, nothing against McDonald's, but they're loaded with fat. So you're still getting, although you're getting the fat and the protein at the same time you're getting the carbs, that will still cause you to have less of a spike than if you ate the burger and then the fries. Whereas if you ate the fries and then the burger, you're going to have a much more dramatic spike. So it's amazing how just little things can make such huge differences.
I agree. And I think there will be many diabetics and MEM1 patients possibly listening who have received maybe oversimplified advice when it comes to what to eat, when to eat, how to eat it. Maybe they've not even been told anything about food. So I think just hearing something very small and very easy to apply is going to be so helpful.
Yeah.
The next thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the gym. So I know from my experience when I had my insulinomas, and even now as I'm conscious of my blood sugar, but don't have blood sugar problems per se, there are factors other than food that can affect our blood sugar. What might those be? I know I've spoken to diabetic friends. They have to be careful in hot weather, and they do have to be mindful when they're exercising. Like, are those important when you're working with a client? Are those kind of factors that they need to be taking attention or paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. Something as the weather, whether it's hot or cold, my insulin demands in the summer are a third less than they are in the winter. And part of that is I'm more active. But things like if you get nervous, I was nervous, I'll be honest, last night going to bed, and I did several calming things that I know help decrease my anxiety. I'm not an anxious person, but I anticipated my blood sugar either spiking high or going low. Now that didn't happen. And I was so excited. I was like, your calming is working, like you're doing a good job. But things like if you get into an argument with a friend, generally if you've if you're someone that gets into a lot of arguments, you will notice that either your blood sugar goes high or your blood sugar goes low. um, there's just so many. It is very important. Like I know for myself, i I work 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night at my nursing job. And so for me, I didn't want to get up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to go work out before work. So I chose to go after work. So by the time I got to the gym, it was 8 o'clock. By the time I got home, it was 9:30, and my blood sugars were bottoming out in the middle of the night. And I was eating, I mean, a substantial amount of food before I went to bed. And I was just like, okay, your body is not, this obviously is not a good solution for you. So I learned that for me, I don't go to the gym on the days I work. I don't go to the gym at all. I go on my off days. And so for me, I get up at 6:30. I'm in the gym by 7:30. I work out for a few hours and I come home. Um, and you just have to find what works for you. I found that I do not at all, and I teach this in my program, no foods are off limits. Some people are like, well, you're a diabetic, or you're this, or you can't eat that. Girl, you can eat whatever you want. Now, do you need to eat a dozen cookies? No. But can you have a cookie every once in a while? Absolutely. And it's amazing that that mindset of I can't have that, when you change that to I can, you no longer crave it. I used to, I love donuts. I love, in any kind, cake donuts especially, but I love donuts. And up until about 6 years ago, I would literally binge eat 2 dozen donuts about once every 3 months. I cringed saying that, but I did, because I told myself, and my doctor said, you can't have that. That's got sugar, like an abundance of sugar. Well, you told me I can't have something, and I'm going to eat it. Like, and I would literally get 2 dozen donuts and eat them within 3 days. Like, horrible, horrible. Don't recommend doing that. And about 5 years ago, I got a coach, and she said, I want to work on your mindset around this. And the moment we changed it from, and I truly believed I can have a donut. I can't have 12 donuts in one sitting. But if I want a donut, I can have a donut. And that simple mindset change, I don't crave donuts, every day. I have I call it my cheat meal. I don't like the word cheat. But if I've had a really big, heavy lifting day at the gym, I get a donut. I get one, and it may take me, I might have half of it. I might eat it all at the same time. I may eat it over 2 days, but you can work a donut into what you're eating for the day and it not throw your diet, or whatever. I don't like it. I don't like the word diet, but your eating habits, it won't throw them out of control. You just, maybe don't have a piece of bread at dinner. Okay. Like it's totally workable. So, but kind of back to your question, it can be the weather. It can be when the barometer changes. I mean, little things that you don't think about. I know that it's where I live. It's been raining for the last week and a half, and I've had to bump up my basal rate. The amount of insulin I take every hour, about I don't know, 20%. Now, part of that I think is I'm more sedentary. I'm not outside walking around, and that's definitely playing a factor in it. But part of it is like it's just gloomy, and my attitude is not is just down. I'm not, as easily, I'm not my light, perky self. And there's so many these little small variables that is just life that we don't really think about. But every single one of those can potentially affect your blood sugars. And the thing that's so amazing about it is like, what if the variables that affect you, Lizzie, may not even affect me? I mean, it's just everybody is so different. But when you take time for yourself and you really sit down and you do the time and like, okay, when I feel this way, this is what my blood sugars do. When I feel this way, this is what they have a tendency to do. And so that's why it's so important that you come back to making yourself a priority, like being curious about why does this happen? And the amazing thing, at least with my diabetes and myself, is that once I think I have it all figured out, something changes. And then you've got to kind of tweak things. But the thing is, you've got the good foundation, and so you'll much more quickly work through those, and it'll be a piece of cake within just super quick.
I love so much about what you've shared there, and particularly your honesty and your vulnerability with, what is so acceptable and normal as a human, which is to love sweet foods or
Mhm.
salty foods if that's your type of thing, and have a binge. I mean, I'm going to put like all my limbs up. If I could put my legs up, I would. I'm sitting cross-legged on the ground. I would show you my feet with my hands because it's so acceptable. And I know in my own journey, one of the biggest problems that's affected me more even than the binging itself is, or the overeating itself, is like the guilt that comes with it, and those horrible like emotions. And one of the questions that you've kind of already answered is, how much like emotion and stress can really play in with things like blood sugar and, general overall health as well. And not only have you answered that, you've also helped, I guess, bust a myth, which is just because someone has been given a diagnosis of diabetes, or they might be an MEM1 patient and dealing with blood sugar problems, like that doesn't necessarily mean cutting out all sugary foods. And if someone wants to do that because whatever it suits them, then that's okay. But it's not a kind of like hard and fast rule. And as you say, everyone is so unique, and what works for one person, as I know myself, is not going to work for another. And I think that's like just such a perfect myth to have busted. I'm sure many people will be reticent to listen to diabetes type information because they're probably worried about seeing, oh, you have to cut this out, you can never have a dessert, this, that, and the other. And actually, that's not kind of realistic. That's not the lives that we want to lead. And I'm really grateful that you've shared that.
No, I'm happy. I mean, it, um, there is, some people will say, well, a diabetic myth is, well, you're a diabetic, you can't eat carbs. Well, let me tell you something. I'm a power lifter. A week ago, I lifted almost 65,000 pounds of weight in under 3 hours. Okay. Carbs are energy. Carbs, I'll say that again. Carbs are energy. And I've never suffered with being anorexic, but I have had, growing up, I watched my mother struggle with her weight up and down and up and down, the yo-yo. And I never really had a weight issue. I mean, I was never chunky, I was never super skinny, but I was very athletic, I was very active. But as I got, in my 20s, my 30s, I'm now in my mid 40s, I have yo-yoed from 100 pounds to 230 pounds, and I can tell you that I started I played volleyball in high school, I played basketball in high school, but really got away from the gym because just life happens. And in 2021, I got back into the gym because I had gained like 40 pounds. And I was like, this is not acceptable. And I could go on some crash diet and I'd lose the weight, but then I would just gain it all back plus 20 pounds. And like, I was like, you like, get back in the gym, like start moving your body every day. And so I got back in the gym. And then after about 9 months of being in the gym, I was invited to go to a powerlifting meet by one of my coaches. And at the meet, and this again is going to go back to community, it was men and women, but everybody was supporting everybody. There was a 90-year-old woman that was literally squatting, 100 pounds, and she was like 90 pounds. And, and the girls and the guys, it didn't matter if they were 20, if they were 60, like everybody was encouraging everybody. And my coach at the time, my personal trainer was like, girl, your body responds better to lifting lower reps and heavy weights. Whereas some people's bodies respond better to, lower weight and higher reps. And she's like, I think you'd be good at powerlifting. And so I actually started strictly powerlifting in February of 23. So I've been doing it just a little over 2 years. And I fought for about 18 months. When I started just going to the gym and working out, I was eating less than 800 calories a day. Okay, that is like my basic, this is what your body needs to survive, is like 1400 calories. Well, I was starving I wasn't doing it intentionally, but I was starving myself. And so of course I was holding on to weight because my body's like, oh my gosh, you're starving me. I've just got to hold on to everything, and it took me about 18 months of realizing. And I had one of the gym owners, like he literally got 2 inches from my face. And he's like, Christina, you're not eating enough. You are not going to grow your muscles. You're not going to get stronger if you don't feed yourself. He's like, carbs are energy. Protein is muscle mass. Don't make it complicated. And when I shifted that, and I'll tell you, 18 months. I mean, I fought it because of everything I learned growing up, and watching my mom. And I mean, I'd been yo-yoing for, 20, 30 years. And once I made that shift, you don't want to know how many carbs I eat a day. How I'm like, but I mean, I lift massive amounts of weight 3 days a week, and so it just, I go to my endocrinologist and she tells me I'm morbidly obese. I am 5'4". This is very vulnerable. I weigh 210 pounds. I have recently, in the last 6 months, lost about 20 pounds. And for me, it's not about the number on the scale. It's that I want to lower my body fat percentage. I want to lose fat and I want to gain muscle. And she tells me every time, you are, per your BMI, you're morbidly obese. Well, I think BMI is crap. I'll just be honest. Because look at bodybuilders, look at power lifters, that the more you weigh, the more you can, and I mean like your muscle mass, the more you weigh, the more you can lift. And every bodybuilder I know is morbidly obese. They are not. They're 6% body fat. They're 3% body fat. But per the medical standards, they're morbidly obese. And so that's why I think it's important to, I'm sorry, I jumped on my box here, my soapbox, but I think it's important to really, you know, what are your goals? Screw what the doctor says. Okay. If I weighed 140 pounds, which is what my doctor wants me to weigh, I look like I'm anorexic. Like I'm literally all but half the size I am now. I have no energy. I I just that is never, I've not been 140 pounds since I was like 18 years old. I mean, that's not me. And that's definitely not what I want. And I finally, on my last appointment, my doctor was really harping on my numbers. And I said, okay, let me explain something to you. 18 months ago, my blood pressure was borderline hypertensive. You were threatening to put me on another pill, like a pill for my high blood pressure. My resting heart rate was 110. I could not walk a flight of stairs without being short of breath. I now spend 45 minutes on the stair climber 3 days a week. Now, and my heart rate doesn't get above 90. My resting heart rate is 60 to 70. My blood pressure is 113 over 60. Like cardiovascularly wise, and by the way, I've lost almost 20% body fat. Okay. I know that per my weight, I'm morbidly obese, but I am 90% healthier than I was 18 months ago. Like it's not all about, you've got to see the big picture, but you've also got to see the little picture. And there is not a fiber of my body that ever wants to be 140 pounds. It just, I just, I don't, there is no part of that that I want anything to do with. And so I know I went off on a tangent and I apologize, but like, what are your goals? What do you want to, what's important to you? And yes, you do need advice and help from your physicians. I'm not playing light to that. But if I did what my doctor said, I would still be 60% body fat. I would still be not able to walk, not run, walk up a flight of stairs. I would probably be on a antihypertensive medicine. I don't want to take another pill. Like I take enough. Um, and so it just find out what's important to you and find somebody that empowers you and that encourages you and supports you. And that's why the diabetes community is just so is just so amazing because we're all about, I mean, I have somebody that he's done Ironmans. He's a type 1 diabetic and he's 35, 40 years old and he does Ironmans. We have, professional swimmers that are type 1 diabetics. We've got, marathon athletes. I mean, I've done a half marathon twice, you know. Did I think I was going to die? Yes. But it was an amazing experience. And I learned a lot about myself and I also learned a lot about what my diabetes does. Does it take a lot of extra planning? Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, but is it worth it? Absolutely. It builds your confidence, it makes you stronger. It's definitely more empowering.
Thank you for bringing light in such an amazing open way to, I think, a very systemic issue we have, not just in diabetes, MEN1 health, but everywhere. And it's this idea that, you know, a certain measure or a certain metric or a certain way of doing things is right and that that is not questionable. And I think as patients, or I'll speak for myself, as a patient myself, I've had to really learn to sit with sometimes uncomfortable information and to let it land and process it and know what it is that I'm going to hold on to and what it is that I'm going to let go of. And I think if there's one thing that I would want listeners to take away from this episode, and I'll ask you yours in a second, it's just to really tap in, to what feels right inside. And as I say, sometimes what's right isn't always comfortable and it can take a little while. It can take a little bit of resistance, as I've experienced. But knowing that anything, as you said, that empowers you rather than drags you down and makes you feel stuck and restricted, as I've felt so contracted before with certain things. Like that's not healthy. That information isn't helpful. It isn't healthy. It's not gonna help me grow towards where I want to be. And I love what you said about goals as well, and those are so individual and so unique, and that's kind of how I wanted to finish off my bit. And I'm going to pass the mic over to you for the last time and just ask you if there's one thing that anyone listening could take away, whether they are an MEN1 patient, a diabetic, whether they're just listening because they're curious or they've landed on this podcast by accident. What is something that they could take away that you can give them?
Um, I'm gonna try not to get emotional. You're not alone. And if I would empower you to, if you're not getting the answers to your questions, go out, be curious, invest in yourself, which is not always easy. And that doesn't necessarily mean spending money. I mean, it can, obviously, but putting yourself first and really digging in and finding what your goals are. And like you said, sometimes you have to sit and be uncomfortable and giving yourself grace. That is, you only have the power to make choices on what you know. And but this is the thing, as you get curious, as you invest in yourself, as you kind of buck the system a little bit, you're going to be getting little tidbits and big tidbits of information that you can put in your toolbox. And number one, that's going to empower you. And you can say, well, I want to do A. This is my goal. And then let's say you get to A and you achieve your goal and you're like, that really wasn't all that's cracked up to be. I don't like the way that feels now. It's okay to scrap it. It's okay if you don't get there. If halfway there you're like, yeah, this isn't my journey. This isn't it. Doesn't make you a failure. Fail means first attempt in learning. I mean, I don't like, and the thing is that if you don't ever try, if you're not failing as you're trying something, you're not really trying. Like and I feel like it's in those stumbles that you learn the most about yourself, about your disease process. Um, and I just, my big thing is be curious and take time for yourself, because those are two things that you will never lose. I mean, you'll only get better and more information and stock your toolbox even better the more you do those things.
Christina, thank you for that parting piece of advice. Thank you for being so open, so honest. You were not only knowledgeable, but very real. And as I say, I've done this podcast, I've a couple of years now, I've had many guests, and the episodes that land are the ones where I feel like there is no difference in some ways between myself and the person who's sitting on the screen opposite me. It doesn't matter what the title is that comes before or after my name, doesn't matter like what experience we've been through. There's so much gold that is relatable, and I just know that people listening back are going to take so much away. And to be able to apply it to real life as well. There's a lot in medicine that happens on paper and on, test results, scans, and it's like, no, actually, let's kind of make this real. Let's make this, as experiential as it is. And I'm so grateful for all the tangible tips that you've given me. I've learned loads, and I know that anyone listening back will have done as well. And I wish you all the best with your community. You're doing amazing things, and I look forward to having you back on again at some point in the future if you were keen to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has just been such a great experience and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.